Welcome to Extremely Live. I am Micah Rock and Roll, and I am here with author, illustrator Kelly Light. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So, like many people I've had on the show, we met very briefly at Indie Comics Creator Con. You were a big fan of my pals' toys in the in the gumball machine there. And I friended you on Instagram, and I was very impressed with your work, and I just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit today, get to know you and all the stuff you've been up to.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you did reach out because honestly, that the Indie Creator Comic Con,
It's tricky,
right? Yeah, it's 3 C's, right?
Yeah.
Was so cool, right? And there was so much great stuff there. But when I saw that gumball machine, man, my mind was just it just blew up. I thought that was not only do I love it's remembering my years as a young gambler, right? Pumping the coins in and seeing what I got, but also that what a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? What a smart thing to do whenever because I do book festivals, so whenever you're in a situation where you're in a room filled with everybody's wares. Right. And you're like, okay, well, what's going to make me stand out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, that gumball was smart. And the little toy was so cool.
Yeah.
So great.
Right
Yeah, you have the koala. I have the koala.
Yeah, I got the koala.
The glow in the dark one is the one that I got.
Oh, nice.
Yes, look at those. Yeah. Yeah. And then again, each one had to be handmade too. So.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
How smart and cool. And then to have the accompanying zine, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was really great. What a great day that was.
Yeah, it was super fun. That was my first convention, and I was quite pleased. It was a good experience for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into it. So, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up, and how did you get interested in drawing and character creation and stuff like that?
So I grew up on the Jersey Shore. So down the shore, as we say. We don't say the Jersey Shore. We say down the shore. So I grew up, in New Jersey. And some of my earliest memories of being a kid are literally like laying on the shag rug, watching cartoons and drawing cartoons. Not just taking them in, but with paper in front of me, trying to draw as fast as I could while I watched the actual cartoon. So I think that I can remember being like 4 doing that. So I think I always wanted to draw cartoon characters. And for a good, until the time that I did decide, am I going to go to art school and am I going to pursue this? That's when I kind of had to go like, oh, well, what can I do with this love, right? Because I loved comics. I loved comic strips. I loved animated TV shows and animated movies. And I also loved children's books because they all had cartoon art in them.
Yeah.
So, So, my mom and dad had a diner.
Oh, cool. Jersey, no less.
It's the land of the diner. Right?
What area of Jersey? I was born in Ocean Grove, right across from Asbury Park.
Right. It was in Manasquan.
Oh, cool. There you go.
So right there.
Yeah.
I love Ocean Grove.
Yeah, Ocean Grove's nice.
Ocean Grove is like this tiny little, I know it's a little weird there,
yeah.
But it's also it's part of the reason why it's so beautiful is because it is weird. It wouldn't be preserved like that.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
If it wasn't a tiny little Victorian hamlet next to giant Asbury Park.
Yeah.
Like how? So 12 minutes away is like Manasquan.
That's awesome.
So people would stop at the diner on the way.
Who knows? I may have eaten at your diner.
It was called the Village Kitchen. It was at the end of Peddler's Village Shopping Center.
Nice.
Across from the Big Clown. Do you remember what that was?
Yes. I do vaguely remember.
It was on a circle.
Yeah.
It was right there.
That's cool.
Yeah. And now it's just like this deserted, like I think like 2 years ago, I drove down. It's like a deserted dump because they want to build condos, of course.
Of course.
But they're fighting over the land. So, yeah. So I spent all that time in the diner. Like my mom and dad were so busy working so many hours. So I have an older brother, and we would, like, my dad had a booth in the back that was filled with paper and pencils and crayons and a TV with an antenna, so that we had a place to hang. But we also would deliver, the people who ran the stores, the merchants, they would order food from the diner. So in the shopping center that the diner was at the end of. So we would take all of our quarters that we earned as tips, and we'd either go to the arcade or the comic book shop. So it was a childhood filled with, just constant cartoon drawing and cartoon taking in.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I watched a video you made about your career, and you brought up, where is it? I wrote it down. The Smithsonian Collection of Newspaper Comics, this book.
Yeah.
I've heard of this book by many like cartoonists and comic book people. Both that one and the other Smithsonian one, I think, is about specifically comic books. That's a very influential book. It's got a lot of people excited. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that book came out around 1980. I think it was published around then. And I think it is this kind of sleeper, huge influence on a lot of people. I was 11 when I cracked it open. I had, I found it at the library first. Mm-hmm. It's the big one, which is the newspaper comic one, is the one that I found. And the shorter one is the comic book comics. Because even though we had, awesome Sunday funny pages, mm-hmm. that included this huge, just, swath across the history of comics. And it just gave you so many different styles in one book that you could just go like, I'm a huge fan of Pogo by Walt Kelly, right? So, and that makes sense since I tend to draw for kids. I like to draw things that are slightly cute. But at the same time, like, I remember just falling in love with like Terry and the Pirates, and where else would I have seen that? Because it wasn't in paper anymore, at least not in New Jersey. So like so many different styles of cartooning in those books. And yeah, it's neat. It's a cool thing that you start to hear that a lot of people, also were exposed to those.
Yeah. My version of that is in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, actually. Mm-hmm. My grandparents lived there. So we would go there every summer to visit my grandparents. They owned, you might have even heard of it. It was called Shoreview. It was like kind of like a retirement home or something, like boarding home. Boarding home is the word they use.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
But it was one of those kind of Victorian-ish buildings, mm-hmm. right along that strip.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was a huge comic book collector, like just tons and tons and tons of comics. And I had, in that video, you'd mentioned like your brother was into like X-Men and like and the Marvel side of things, and then you mm-hmm. went more for the Archie and the Harvey Comics side of things.
Dell and Gold Key.
Totally. Yeah. I was similar in that my little brother like loved Spider-Man and Batman, and I liked them too, but I was drawn to my grandfather's collection of Duck comics, the Carl Barks stuff, and the Don Rosa stuff, where it's like it's more humorous, it's more cartoon, more like fun than like action. Although there was a little bit of like adventure in those stories, mm-hmm. but I was drawn to that, and I was drawn to he had just like Lil Abner and all those crazy he had just had all that newspaper stuff, and I was drawn to Little Nemo and Slumberland was the one that I like couldn't get enough of.
I agree.
Amazing.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah,
it's mind blowing. I think that Winsor McKay, who also was an animator, right?
Yeah,
like his ability to draw.
It's like
it's insane.
It's really kind of psychotic is how I would say. Like, how can you be that good? It's just insane. But same thing of just like this rare opportunity of getting introduced to all this
That sounds
information.
like heaven.
It
And
was,
also the fact that they were your grandfathers. Like I think there's like a whole nother level of like, oh, like your grandfather collected them, and then you're exposed to what like lit your grandfather's imagination on fire.
totally.
Like that's a whole nother level of like cool art infection.
It
like,
was extremely influential. That's
yeah,
definitely true. But yeah, just like that overload of awesome information, like similar to the book, like just all this stuff all in one place to like pour over and obsess over. That's good. I think a lot of creative people have that kind of like sparking thing, like talisman or something, like something that infects them and sets them off on a path.
It's fascinating because I think that there's something that connects all creatives, like people who choose to not do the, I don't want to say easier, but the straighter path. If you're gonna live a creative life, you're gonna have a winding road
Yeah.
runs off course and hit tons of potholes, and so that's all creatives who choose to try to make a living doing something that they love, right?
Yeah.
But then I start to think like, what is the thing that makes people choose the genres that they kind of fall into, and there's art with a capital A. There's all art and fine art, and even in the world of illustration, there's different kinds of like subgenres. But the cartooning thing to me is like, I would love to know like what is that like secret ingredient that the people who want to draw in a non-representational, highly stylized, it can be based in reality, but usually it's totally through your own weird personal filter.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, that's the thing that I'm always like,
Yeah.
getting to know other cartoonists and like how they cartoon and why they cartoon and what is their weirdness.
Yeah.
Right? That like sparked that in there. So
do you have stuff that you're really into that you don't make yourself? Like it's like the opposite of what you do, but you're still like very interested in it. Is there anything like that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of I have a wide range of cartooning styles that I like to look at that have nothing to do. I'm a huge fan of horror comics. And I think part of that is growing up as a kid and having this comic book shop daily, like at the diner. I could look at all the different comics, even the ones that I was way too young for, I remember. But for some reason, it's kind of the same thing. Like I love the Twilight Zone, and I love things that are mildly scary.
Yeah.
There were no Goosebumps when I was a kid. Those books didn't exist, right?
True.
I had like EC horror comics and all the weird different kinds of rip-off horror comics, and like, I love a zombie boyfriend. Like I love the art in them. I love
the EC comics art is quite impressive.
Easy.
Yeah.
It's just so good. So yeah, there's lots of stuff that I like that isn't necessarily what I make. Yeah, and I love, even like in the last year or so, just like kind of digging in to the indie comics and seeing where and how like it's grown in directions that are so personal, and memoir comics. And I took a workshop at the Center for Cartoon Studies, I think about a year ago, which was a memoir comics workshop. And like that's totally different to like try to like find the stories that are yours and they're personal, but they're also universal, and then making them into comics is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So you have these kind of inputs that are influencing you. You mentioned one of your number one influences was Chuck Jones cartoons, which same thing. Like I remember seeing that name on the intro titles and being like, oh, I recognize that name. Man, he's pretty incredible. But you have all these influences. When did you start to like move in the direction of like, I want to try and do this? Were you like a teenager and you're like, I know I want to do this, or Tell me about that kind of evolution from being a little kid having fun to like, I want to try this.
I know I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to do it, and I knew I was going to try and do it definitely by middle school.
Wow.
And then I spent high school trying to find the paths to do it. So even in high school, I would take night classes in colleges.
Oh, wow.
In New Jersey. Yeah. And I would, like, I remember being, like 16 and starting to walk around town and offering to make flyers for businesses and paint windows and like whatever I could do with my cartooning chops I had back then. Like, I started freelancing when I was in high school.
That's awesome.
There was a DJ in my town. So when I was 11, we left down the shore and we moved to New Providence, which is right next to like Berkeley Heights. So there was a DJ from WNEW radio, 102.7, classic rock radio. He lived in my town, and I had grown up obsessed with the Monkees. So they were doing a reunion tour in 1984, which I guess I was 14, and like I started drawing this guy pictures of the Monkees, like cartoons of the Monkees. So I got to know the DJ just because I would like leave these drawings in his mailbox, because I really was like, I want tickets to concerts. So eventually
leaving bribes.
When I was 17, he gave me my first freelance gig for the WNEW music magazine, drawing cartoons of rock and musicians.
That's so awesome. Hello, I'm Micah, creator of Extremely Live. If you're enjoying what you're watching, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend. Please, that would be amazing. Extremely Live is a podcast and a live stream that is value for value. If you're getting value out of what we're making, we ask that you send us some value in return by going to extremely.live/donate. We'll take anything. We appreciate everything. And with that, let's get back to the video.
Yeah, so I think I didn't ever want to do anything else. And then I had to figure out, well, where the heck do I go and study this? And that was a little bit tough. There weren't too many places then that had a major in cartooning or animation, or there was CalArts in California. There was a place in Canada that you could go to. There weren't too many. So I went for illustration.
That's great. I think that's pretty rare. I don't think most people have that kind of assuredness at such a young age, and also like an entrepreneurial spirit of like, I have to make my own opportunity here, because that's pretty unique. Of all the people I've talked to who try this stuff, like often it's like, oh, I wish I got started earlier. That's definitely my story. That's pretty cool. That's
it's
impressive.
Also like what was wrong with you?
No, that's
all you thought about. Yeah,
that's awesome. It's a clear.
It was definitely a focus. It was like tunnel vision.
And, were your parents like supportive? Were they down for that, or were they like, oh, this is weird, or did they understand?
They were, because they took me to see the art schools, like New York City art schools and some East Coast art schools. I wanted to go to California. They were like, no, they didn't want me to go that far away. So yeah, they were always super supportive, and it wasn't until years later that I knew that they were secretly saying to each other, well, we'll be supporting her for the rest of her life, but they never told me no. They never told me not to do it, so
that's good. That's good.
When I was somewhere in I was like 26 or 27 years old, my dad visited me at my office in New York City where I was working, and I was working in cartoon licensing, and cried because I had a corner office in New York City doing cartoon licensing, and he was like, I never imagined you were gonna
that's awesome
actually make money like doing this. Yeah. So
that's very cool.
They were very cool. Yeah.
So yeah, let's move towards your like proper education. Where did you end up going, and what'd you end up studying?
So I went to Syracuse University.
Cool.
upstate New York or where they call it up there.
Yeah, this is
Um,
so weird. I have to interrupt
yeah,
already. We moved from
yeah.
Ocean Grove to this place called New Berlin, which is in New York, which is like 40 minutes from Binghamton and probably like an hour and a
Oh,
half from Syracuse. So we had
yeah.
a similar like locational path.
Yeah. So you know of the
Yeah.
snow in Binghamton too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I gotta tell you, like Syracuse is a cool place. It's a
Mm.
weird, again, it's a weird city. It's a
Yes.
weird place.
All of
Lot,
upstate New York is like cool, but also
yeah.
weird. And it's like where you fall on those
Hmm.
two ends of things, whether you
Yeah.
stay or go.
It's like places that are like they were so crazy busy during the Industrial Revolution,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And when the industry closed, then it's kind of like it hit the skids for a while, you know, and then they start to come back, and you're like, oh, it's got pockets of funky, but it's also kind of weird, and
Yes.
it's yeah. So Syracuse had an illustration major, which at the time was like one of the best illustration departments
Oh,
that you could
wow.
go to.
That's awesome.
Was headed by this dude named Murray Tinkelman, who was then like he was like a walking encyclopedia of the history of illustration. And even if you say his name now, people are like, "Oh, Murray Tinkelman," like, "Oh, Murray Tinkelman." Big deal with the Society of Illustrators in New York, and um, he was a hardcore hard guy. It was hard. He was hard to please. That
Ah,
very Tinkelman. But I think in
gotcha.
some ways that was a good thing to get like a trial by fire to make sure you were capable of being a freelancer.
Mm,
Because again, it is not easy.
no, no.
It's not easy to be somebody who's constantly making your own opportunities. So
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was it was a good education for that to like be it either into you or out of you.
Yeah.
You want it or you don't.
Was
But
there
if you
like a lot of students like being like, this is too much, I'm out of here? Yeah.
end of so freshman year we were all just art students, and then sophomore year you declared your major. End of sophomore year, boom, half the kids are gone. Like boom,
Yeah.
absolutely. One of my best friends, this guy, Dave, was just like, nope, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a librarian. I'm gone. So yeah, it was yeah, it was tough, but I think again it kind of had to be
Hmm.
um for the reality of what happens, again,
Yeah.
as someone who's going to be working for themselves.
Totally. So you majored in illustration. Um, just real quick, I want to talk about your work. I was thinking of it as like they look like your characters look like they were caught like with it, like a candid photograph. They look very much alive and kind of like in motion, and like you can kind of read their personality. It's really really impressive, and like makes me realize like, man, I gotta like work on that. Like just you they feel it feels like a still of an animation, which it makes sense because eventually you did get into
Mm.
animation. But I think that's a really powerful kind of skill that I don't think a lot of people have. Of like, I mean, I like all kinds of art and comic art, but like comic art doesn't necessarily look like a still of like an animation, like a keyframe from an animation necessarily.
Right.
It's just like a pleasing image or whatever. But the stuff you're drawing really looks like we're catching them in the act of some kind of motion or something, which is really a powerful, cool image. I encourage people to. What's your website? I'll send people
It's
there.
kellylight.com.
Go to kellilight.com and click the shop and look at all those prints. They look insanely just there's so much personality. It's really, really impressive.
Thanks. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So
I literally think like that was again like it does come from working in traditional hand drawn animation and having to do all those pencil drawings, but I do think it's a culmination of what I've taken in, and what I don't even know if I try to do it, but I think for me, it's the idea, and it's something that Chuck Jones said all the time, is that an animator is an actor with his pencil. A cartoonist can be an actor, with actor with their pencil. And I know that when I draw, that's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm imagining them in an animated short and pushing pause somewhere in my brain at like exactly the right moment.
That's
and then
smart.
Boom. And I always overdraw too. So I draw way more than ever needs to go into a book, because I'm trying to see how are they going to act. Well, they could react this way, they could react that way, they could react this way. And I do so much more drawing than needs to be done.
Yeah, let's go into that. That's really interesting to me, like your process. So really, really quick, Chuck Jones is like, he's like very good at like funny facial expressions, like all these key like if you think of Looney Tunes, chances are you're picturing like a funny moment that Chuck Jones was responsible for. So that makes sense to me that you're good at like you said you were a little kid literally trying to like look at them and draw as they were happening. It makes sense that that's kind of imbued in your style. But let's talk about overdrawing and like what are you talking about, like for your books? Like you drew? Yeah, just tell me about that a little bit. Like what is that overdrawing? What's the end product of that overdrawing, and what does the overdrawing look like?
So if you think about, a typical children's picture book has 32 pages, right? So 16-ish spreads, double page spreads, right? So you think like, that's not that much to draw, right? You have that to draw. I draw hundreds of drawings for 32 pages. Gotcha. So I start every book like most artists start any kind of project with like thumbnail drawings that are really scribbly. It's just that my thumbnail drawings are more focused on gesture. Some people focus more on composition or value, and I'm like, no, I just want to have I want to know what is going on in the acting in my thumbnails. So you can look at my thumbnails and you can actually see the characters acting in the thumbnails, and they I'll just do tons of those, and then that helps me get the story out. I will start like a book with kind of more of an outline than a manuscript, which is kind of the opposite of what a lot of children's book author or illustrators work. They'll start with a manuscript and then they'll draw. I draw and I get all my drawings good, and then I write the least amount of words possible. So because all the pictures are doing so much, so you don't need as many words, and especially if your characters can act, you don't need to write everything, because the kids can look and they know what's going on in the way the characters are. That is an
annoying thing that happens in comics often, whereas they'll spell out what the image is already telling you, and it's like, why? Like, let it just get rid of the word balloons. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So so when I get like a storyboard really well done, then I just hit the character drawings, and I will just, like I said, I will draw until I know the ins and outs of everything about each character, their anatomy, how do they turn, how do they behave, what's their personality. I will just do like a million drawings. I would say hundreds of drawings that inform when I need to make the final drawings, how these characters. So if there's a moment where the character Louise in the book notices that her drawing that is her masterpiece is ripped up, I have like 30 reactions to how would she act if you found out. Should she be angry? Would she be exasperated? Would she faint? Would she, so I would just draw all of them and figure out which really felt true.
Do you have them like set up around like when you're sitting down to do the actual illustration, do you have your references all around you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that comes out of animation is that idea. Today they call it visual development. And that's like the hot career everybody wants to get into. There was no visual development term when I was in animation. It was just part of the process. You just kind of did it. You made model sheets.
Yeah.
Right. So you had your model sheets, you had your ones that were very strict that gave you the like the construction. And then you had the ones that were emotive or acting, and they would be on the wall right around your desk. So that
That
while
makes
you were
sense.
drawing all those drawings, you just glance up and you're like, oh yeah, okay, oh yeah, oh
Yeah.
wait, oh looks like I put the eyes too close together. Oh yeah, oh yeah, you're just like glancing. So
That's smart.
yes, yeah. So I'm someone who uses a lot of tape on walls, a lot, or tape on my desk. I'll keep like lots of my drawings out. I do work digitally as well, and I will say it's not the same process. It really isn't. And I
No.
love my iPad, but it's not the same. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work. It doesn't feel the same. Yeah, I think drawing on paper
Same.
is such a better feeling.
Yeah. I appreciate the digital in that, like, basically you're talking about staying on model when you're like glancing up at your characters and like, oh, the
I
eyes are
think
too far
the
apart.
actual like feeling of making my characters come to life happens better on paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can always go to final digital, right?
Yes.
So when
Yeah.
I go to color, but that process of discovery to
Mm-hmm.
me happens so much better.
On
Um,
paper.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then when I go, I do a lot of final in digital, and
Yeah.
but but the whole front loading part of any project, I'm like, oh, I'd rather be so much rather
Yeah.
be there.
I do agree. The only thing I like about digital, well, not the only thing, but the thing I think the best part of digital is like just literally being able to lasso something and move it. Like that, that is nice.
It is. It
but
is.
but like the organic flow is always more enjoyable on paper, and I work as a video editor, so I'm staring at computer screens all day, so I will always opt for looking at paper than stare at a screen for more. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I already do that 8 hours a day. If I don't have to do that, I will absolutely opt for like pen and ink on paper. It's a very
Yeah.
meditative and enjoyable
Yeah.
experience.
That's what I always say it is. It's like it's a form of meditation. Somebody once gave me for one of my birthdays the gift of transcendental meditation lessons. I'm a
Ooh.
huge Beatles fan, and I thought like, this is gonna rock your world. And I went through like weeks of this stuff. It was in Long Island. It was probably like, one of the famous places where like Howard Stern did it or something.
Yeah.
And I went through weeks there, and at the end of it all, you do a check-in where your guide or your guru comes to you, and they do this check-in. Like in the beginning, they give you your mantra. Like it's all very like I am giving this to you, and then at the end, it's like, and now we must check in. And how do you feel this is working for you? And I was like, I feel like this when I draw.
Yeah.
And that person was like, like their brain exploded. And I was like, because it's a meditation when you go to the zone when you're drawing, and I've been doing it my whole life. So I feel like the people who are so stressed. So, I mean, life is horrible and stressful these days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful I have this thing where I can just like, I'm just going to sit and draw.
Yeah.
Feel your blood pressure go woo, 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 woo,
It's
woo,
true.
you know?
I like all that woo-woo stuff, and I've actually looked into transcendental meditation. You just save me so much time and money, because like
I would say this. I don't want to poo-poo it completely, because if especially like during the pandemic, like those moments where you're like, we are all facing oblivion, and you like can't calm down. I would say that crazy mantra in my head.
Oh, cool.
So I may not have done the whole transcendental thing, but that mantra did become this thing where I would say it to myself, and it would just be like my thing of saying like, stop, calm.
Yeah, that's good.
So it did give me something.
Yeah.
But I draw and I meditate.
Last week I was in. We went. My wife and I went on vacation. We were going to visit her grandfather, and he ended up falling days before we got there, and they like rushed him into like an old people's home, and the whole trip just turned into more like we got to take care of this guy. And
Yeah.
we were driving around like Wichita Falls, Texas, which I've never spent any amount of time there. And it was literally just like wall to wall chain restaurants. And you're talking about like having like that existential
Yeah.
freak. I
Yeah.
was full blown, like
Oh.
only thinking about end of life and like looking around like, oh, there's only Applebee's and McDonald's. I'm going insane. I needed I needed one mantra at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. You can make up your own.
Yeah.
They say it shouldn't be a real word, because all real words bring a connotation with them.
Oh,
so they give you
interesting.
this like, kind of made up word. So yeah, but yeah, I think it's a good thing these days to
Yeah.
have something, right?
Totally.
Something
Just to like
coping
check in
mechanism.
and like,
A
yeah.
healthy coping mechanism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Where do you live now? You live in Brooklyn?
I'm technically in Ridgewood, like right outside
Okay.
Bushwick. How about you? Where are you
Yeah.
living?
So I live in Massachusetts now.
Cool.
But throughout my life, I used to work in Queens.
Nice.
At a certain point, lived in Brooklyn for a while, and lived in Long Island for a long while. But now I live in Massachusetts. I moved here literally like November of 2019, and then we all know what happened.
Yeah.
Like 5 months later, I was glad that I moved at that time from Brooklyn, because all my friends were so stuck, in the city. Were you in the city during the whole lockdown?
Yeah. It was pretty wild. It was
Yeah.
just a couple months there where, same thing. Like literally felt like you were going insane just because there was nowhere to go. I mean, you lived in Brooklyn. Like the last place you want to spend all your time is your apartment. Like you want to go out and do stuff and hang out with people.
Yeah, my apartment was small.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We're lucky in that we moved to Ridgewood like, man, maybe like 3 years ago, and it's a pretty like decent space. So it's like, but it's a railroad, so like there's no like real private part to like, okay, I'm gonna go over here in my like study and like close off and get some personal things. Like none of that's happening. So it's like you're just you're on top of each other 24 hours a day. But that whole time period was it was insane. I did a lot of pretending the world didn't exist while playing Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch.
Me too. So my Nintendo Switch is upstairs untouched for a while now, and I think, oh my God, what must my island look like? Like they are all like horrible and sick, and their grass is over their heads, and they're walking around in rags, and they're all going, F Kelly.
I wish the game did that. That'd be awesome. Like you come back and it's like this like hellhole that you gotta bring back to life.
It's like Lord of the Flies on Animal Crossing, and you show up and then they just like eat you, kill you.
Man, that was a big time sink for me.
No, talk about meditation.
Yeah,
Animal Crossing was like.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. It makes sense. It's it feels like it is right up your alley of like the cute but also kind of funny and like a little bit of a twist to it kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That's cool. So where were we? We got all kinds of tangents.
Well, we were talking about like the art and the process, and and I think the drawing, which is where we kind of left off, is for me, everybody's got their own process, but like for me, I feel like whatever book it is, whatever new idea I have, it always comes down to character.
Yeah.
So there are people who create books or children's books that are more narrative driven, epic quests. And character always counts with everything, with any kind of story you write. But then there are things that are certainly character driven, right? Yeah. So if you think about, in the world of children's books, there are books like that are like Clifford, or Curious George, or like these are things that are like boom, like the name of the characters on the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, things that where the character is really kind of the thing that you hook into. I think that's usually where my brain goes. So when I do all those drawings, I'm getting to know,
Yeah.
that character really
That's
well.
cool. You're making me think of like children's books I was into, and this probably falls more along the lines of not necessarily story, but like I guess it would be called world building now. But Richard Scarry, like the busy world of like
Yeah,
they all the
right behind me. Like
it's awesome.
Yeah, I have all my I still have my copies from when I was a kid. Busy Town.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do people do all day?
Yup.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Yeah.
he spelled out their personalities, I think, pretty well. I haven't read one in forever. I should grab a couple. Because yeah, they had personalities, and you could kind of tell who they were. But it was also cool to me that he built a whole place for them to all live in. It was like when like you're playing with toys and they have like a play set. It's like he made his action figures the characters, and then the town is the play set where they hang out in.
And everything was a cross section, right?
Yeah.
So you had a cross section of the houses, cross section of a ship, cross section. One of my favorite double page spreads in one of his books is his bakery, where they put too much yeast in the bread, and then they have these giant loaves. And so like you see, it's all like, how does the bakery work? What are all the jobs in the bakery? You're taking in so much information as well as humor at the same time. Right. So and you're always looking for Lowly Worm.
Yeah.
You're always looking for, where's Lowly Worm on every page. Yeah, no, he was just, I wish he got more props. Like he's one of the ones I feel like he's a little unsung. Like people always say, "Oh, I love my Richard Scarry books." I'm like, let's talk about, like, he was a genius. Like, he was, what he did.
It's true. Yeah. Like Dr. Seuss is like a stratosphere above him for some reason, which is Dr. Seuss is awesome too, obviously.
Right.
But Richard Scarry is very, very cool. I definitely resonated with that dude. Yeah. That's cool. So we talked about your process. You graduate from illustration college in Syracuse. Where'd you go from there? How'd you get into animation?
So when I was at Syracuse, and I was a little stymied in the illustration department. So when I was there was a huge emphasis on editorial, very serious illustration.
That's the vibe I got when you said the dude was like super intense. I'm like, oh, it sounds like some kind of like The New Yorker is the greatest thing ever made kind of guy.
Yeah. And I love that stuff too. Like I love New Yorker cartoons. I love all illustration. I truly do. It's just not what I do, right? And I always say, like, put a gun to my head, I'll draw you a portrait. I can draw realistically, but I really don't want to, So I was a little frustrated, and the one thing that Murray Tinkleman said to me, which was helpful, was, oh, I don't know if you know this, but there's an old Oxbury stand camera in the basement of the other art building. You might want to go check it out. And I did, and it turned out only the film students were using it to make credits for their student films. So they'd make their films, and then they could do whatever they, attach things, edit things on the Oxbury. So the guy who taught the film students how to use the stand camera, he was an animator in Syracuse named Dave Hickok, and he had a small company called Animotion. And I met him, I showed him my drawings, and he hired me.
That's awesome.
And so at Syracuse, from my sophomore year through graduation for 3 years, I worked at Animotion, and he taught me basically how to do traditional hand-drawn, pencil and paper animation. So when I graduated, he would have been happy for me to stay. And I was like, I'm going to Hollywood. So I packed up my Buick with my pet rabbit, Yahui, and drove across country. And 10 days later, slid on into Hollywood and didn't know where I was going to live, didn't know what I was going to do. Was like, you can only do that at that age. That is the age to do that, to just set out and take a chance on life and rent a room at the Wilshire Boulevard Motel where your roommates are roaches. Yeah, it was pretty nasty until you can find an affordable apartment. Don't tell your parents that you're doing that. Tell them that, oh, yes, I got an apartment. And you're at the Wilshire Boulevard Motel. Yeah, and then just start doing what people do out there. Show your work, show your reel, take the night classes at the union, the animation union. They used to give night classes. Try and get your foot in the door, get your first job as a PA, do PA work, get your next job where you're an assistant to an assistant. Yeah. And you
hear that, young kids? You got to really go for it. You got to show your work and you do have to really get on people's nerves until they give you a break.
You do. So I was having some real struggles in the beginning trying to get work, and I was really frustrated. And I literally one day got the biggest box. There's a store out there called C's Candies. They make good chocolates. I got the biggest box of chocolates and a fistful of balloons and walked into Film Roman, which made The Simpsons.
Oh, cool.
And I walked in with my portfolio and everything and the balloons and the chocolates. I walked in and the lady at the reception desk said, oh, no, it doesn't happen that way. and as I was ready to leave, this guy walked out and he was like, hey, you follow me back. You got chutzpah. And I went back and I became an intern.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yes, you do have to annoy the hell out of people. Yeah. Sometimes if you can annoy the hell out of people in the nicest way possible.
The
nicest way possible. Yeah. Be persistent, but don't be a pain in the butt.
Correct. Yes. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. It's hard today though. I do think sometimes, gosh, I'm lucky for the time. I feel like I had the last gasp of that kind of world.
It's very difficult. Any kind of freelance situation. I'm freelance video editor. All my best work has been because a friend of a friend recommended me. You know what I mean? It's so hard to get that first, chance by a stranger just being all right, they don't seem insane. I guess I'll give them their first break, It's so hard to get that first thing. But if you do, and then you prove yourself, and like you say, you're not, a pain in the ass to work with, chances are that person's going to recommend you to somebody else. And then that person's it's so hard to get that ball rolling, but it's invaluable to build. You just have to get that first thing, and then it builds from there. As long as you aren't awful, that's also part of it. You have to deliver and be pleasant to be around. But
did you study film?
I did. It was called mass communication. But basically I used it as an opportunity to learn how to edit as much as possible. Similarly, as a little kid, I would draw all the time, and I'm kind of pulled in multiple directions. That's, I would say, the major difference between you and me. I was like, oh, I want to make video games, and I like to draw, and my aunt bought my family a camcorder, and now I like to make videos. I was I scattered all over the place. And for whatever reason, by the time it was, I was old enough to start thinking about college, the thing I was most interested in then was making videos and editing. And I basically taught myself how to edit video before it was easy to do so. Using Windows Movie Maker was the free or cheap thing at the time. Final Cut, I think, had just started, but I wasn't a Mac person really. But yeah, so I ended up going to SUNY Oneonta for mass communication, a minor in film,
Yeah.
and
I minored in film too. I
yeah,
had to be able to use that camera at
ah,
Syracuse. So I couldn't unless I was a film minor. But the
right,
thing that made me ask you is that so if you have knowledge of film, if you understand how to tell stories through visuals,
yeah,
whether they be still or they know they're moving, like being an editor has 5 million, benefits of making comics. You
totally.
know,
I
right? You
I
understand
do feel that's the other interesting thing about
spacing, right?
it's
Like,
you can pull in all these different influences into things that you want to make. Like you were interested in, illustration but also animation, and like now
mhm,
your illustrations very much have a life that I don't think probably you would easily, and like you're saying you do it without even thinking, like
mhm,
that's, I would assume, there from your background in animation, that not
right.
necessarily everybody has that skill or that talent. That is the one cool thing, is like you can go off in all these weird directions and then pull
Yep,
all those influences into, what you're interested in. Definitely,
yep,
like thinking of like a frame, a panel is the same
yeah.
exact thing as a frame of a film, like a composition wise. And
Panel to panel
yeah,
is a cut.
totally.
Like,
It definitely has
yeah,
influenced the way I make comics
yeah.
and stuff.
That's cool.
It is cool. And it is like, it's encouraging that nothing is wasted. Like you learn a lesson in everything you do, and you can apply that into anything you're interested in, I think, or at least to a degree.
Yeah, and I also think like in authorship, there's this famous saying about like revision, and it's like you have to murder your darlings.
Yeah.
But if you're a professional editor, like it's not that hard.
Yeah.
You know when you have to cut something out,
Yeah.
because some people really can get really, tied to like, oh, I wrote a beautiful sentence, or for me, like, oh, but I did such a good drawing, and like no, it could be a good drawing, but it doesn't serve the story, so it's
Right.
got to go.
Yep.
Yeah,
This is true.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so that's cool. So you moved to Hollywood, and you
yeah.
refused to take no for an answer, literally, from a
Right.
receptionist, and it ended up getting you an internship, which is awesome.
Yeah.
How did things grow from there?
So from there, I mean, things went well for a little while. I only worked in animation for like I was out of it by 1995. So I graduated in 1992. So it was only 3 years. So it was very hard at that point of my life to have money and pay to live in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So I wound up moving back to New York, following the guy that I would eventually marry, um, to move back home for a little while, and then I still worked in animation a little bit in New York City. There were all these independent animators. There was this awesome woman named Candy Kugel, and she had a company, which I think she still has, called Buzzco Associates. And she was like, hey, I can't pay you. Come work in my animation studio. Help me with my stuff, and you can make your own. And so I got to make like new shorts and try to make a new reel. And
Yeah.
while I was there is when they were getting ready to start these epic Warner Brothers stores. I don't know if you remember those. There were the
Yes.
Disney stores, and
Yep.
then there were the Warner Brothers stores. So they needed artists that could draw the Warner Brothers characters. And so I got like a phone call there where there was a person, like a headhunter on the phone, looking at an animation studio for artists that could draw like Warner Brothers characters. And I was like, yes. And I was so broke. I was like, yes. It pays, yes. Yeah, so I fell into that, being a character artist for cartoon merchandise, first on Warner Brothers characters, and then working for them led to working for everybody:
Yeah.
Nickelodeon, Hanna-Barbera, Disney, Peanuts, Henson, you name it. I drew the character, and it went on a mug, pillowcase, towel, pajamas, sheet set.
That's cool. Was
Yeah,
there
a
anything
long
you
time.
like specifically learned from like drawing other people's like iconic characters?
Well, talk about the idea of having to learn. It was my animation background made uh, that like switch possible,
Mm.
and then to focus on that and to have to truly understand how to draw something on model that
Yeah.
comes from animation because you have
Hmm.
teams of people who are all working on the same character. Um but there's a level with licensed characters where you have to learn to draw these characters the way they're supposed to look. um yeah, so I feel like, again, like eventually it helped with the children's books too, is like to be consistent from page to
Mm.
page and pose to pose. Your characters look
Hmm.
the same, they all look the same. So yeah, it was I would say it was like a dream for the first 5 years that I did that job. Because again, like if you grew up as like a Snoopy fanatic, and then one day you're told like you're going to draw Snoopy for products, or a Mickey
Yeah.
Mouse fanatic and you're going to draw Mickey Mouse on something, and you're actually working with the Walt Disney Company, it's mind blowing. It's a
Mm.
dream come true. And then I would say probably about the seventh year that I was doing that, I started to hate the fact that like everything was like a thing, you know,
Mm.
and what was I really contributing to the world? Another, plastic refillable mug or popcorn
Right.
bucket or a theme park or so then I started to think like, oh, and then you get the itch to kind of do your own thing, draw your own characters, create something that you you're very anonymous in that world. You think in animation, hopefully your name will maybe someday appear in the credits. Well, on cartoon merchandise, your name doesn't
Yeah.
go anywhere.
Yeah.
You can't like walk through a mall and be like, "Hey, I made that," and have anybody believe you. So, I remember I was on vacation in Puerto Rico, and somebody had one of my Coca-Cola polar bear shirts on, and I looked and I said, "Hey, I drew that," and the person was like, "Fuck you." I'm drinking the show. I'm like, okay. So, yeah. So I kind of, I was hedging into like the ninth year where I was like, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done.
That's a
I
long
did,
time to do anything, first of all.
yeah, and I did it
Um,
freelance after that, but I didn't want to work for anybody.
yeah.
I was in house, and then I went freelance, and then after a while doing it freelance, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to think about what can I do with all of this,
Yeah.
where can I take all these skills and where can I do something that's my own? And that's when I decided to try children's books.
That's cool. Real quick,
Yeah.
before we get into that, I want
Yeah.
to talk East Coast versus West Coast. As someone
Yeah.
who has a wife who is an actor who sometimes says,
Yeah.
"Hey, maybe we should go to the L.A." What
Yeah.
was your experience between the two? Like, did you like living in California? Were there things you didn't like? What? Just roughly. You don't have to pit them
Well, I
against
would
each other, but
say I had not yet lived in New York City.
mm,
So I will say the expense of living in Los Angeles for me at the time, I was young when I lived there, the expense was outrageous, but I loved it.
yeah,
When I get to go back, I'm like, I'm so nostalgic for it. When I go back, I just drive. And like, I remember when I lived there, I didn't enjoy driving on the freeways, but now I'm like, oh, I love it. I do love California. I
yeah,
think, having lived both in New York City and in Los Angeles, I am an East Coast
yeah,
person.
yeah. I
Um,
suspect
yeah,
that's true of me as well.
there's just such a different pace and such a different, I don't know what it is. I want to say vibe, but it's
Mm,
true. Like if you're someone who's like, go, go, go,
yeah.
LA is a little different. If you want a slower pace, if you want
Mm.
that,
Interesting. I definitely
yeah.
have to go over there and spend some time there a little. I mean, I've been there very briefly, like visiting friends and stuff, but I've never spent
You
like
know the
two
feeling in New
weeks.
York City? Like, do you know the feeling in New York City where you can be alone surrounded by hundreds of people? Do you know that feeling? Like when you're on
Hmm.
the subway, you don't feel like there's a hundred.
No.
I feel like in the city, you can still be alone, surrounded by people because everybody is kind of in their thing.
Yeah.
in their own bubble in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's the flip in LA where everybody's watching everybody.
Oh, weird.
And
Because they're
that's the
like,
thing that I
are they
don't like.
famous? Can they hook me up? Like that kind of a vibe?
That's what I feel like. That's the difference. Like,
Huh.
I think that New York City is a maze that you have to make your way through.
Yeah.
I think that LA is a shell game.
Oh, weird.
That you can make a comparison. Like LA is always like gotta maneuver, gotta go, you know. And New York, you're just like get out of my way, I gotta go.
That's interesting. All right, tangent. Sorry, I was just curious.
No, but it's a good question. I used to think, did you ever see Aardman Animation Creature Comforts where they take?
No.
Oh, you have to watch this on YouTube. So it's claymation.
Oh, yeah. Were the animals?
Zoo animals.
Yes.
But what they did was they interviewed people and took the audio and they claymated to the audio, and it's so good.
Yeah.
Because it's people, that are just kind of, it's the human voices, but the animals. I always thought it would be great if you put a recorder in a coffee shop in New York and a coffee shop in LA, and you animated the differences. Because it's so different.
That's
the way they talk.
A very cool idea.
About. Yeah. Like it's so different.
Yeah.
So different.
I like I also like the kind of like secretly recording these because it would be different if they knew they were being recorded. That's a good idea. I encourage you to hire someone on Fiverr to sit in a coffee shop and
violate everyone's privacy and record them. Yeah.
That's cool.
You could have done that 20 years ago. Can't now.
Yeah, this is true. All right, so you did a whole lot of work for the man, and you said no more. I want to do my own thing, and that thing was children's illustration. Yes. Yes. That's awesome. So walk us through that. What did that look like?
That looked at I went to a night class at School of Visual Arts in the city to say all right, well, I got to understand some bit of how this, industry works. So I'm going to go take a night class. And I took a night class and it was good. And then I realized that maybe I did have some chops because I remember my teacher that night class took me to see her art director. Like I was the only student that got to go and see that person's art director. So I was like, oh, obviously, again, all that work and all that drawing and all those years gave me some skills that maybe other people haven't developed yet. So I got told to join this organization, the school. It's SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and people can go to scbwi.org. I joined that organization and I worked that organization the way that I've done everything else. I set a goal. I, figured out who I needed to meet, and I redid my portfolio over and over and over again, and kept showing it as often as possible in and around New York City. It was a way to cut through being an anonymous. You can do lots of submissions to children's publishing these days digitally, right? Through newsletters and emails and Instagram and websites. And but I was like, wow, the best salesman for my work was me. So I would always do it in person. It's harder today. The pandemic has killed those opportunities that you can't go and get into the publishing houses and show your portfolios. You can still try to find ways to show people face to face, but it's really hard. Yeah. But for me, I was like, well, that's got to be it. They have to see my portfolio and they have to meet me and talk to me, and I will woo them. And it did take years. It did take years of trial and error till I got my first small publisher book deal. I think that was in 2010. It was first book was a smaller publisher. It was some novelty publisher in Connecticut. And then the next publisher was another smaller, not an educational, but a school. There are certain books that are made just for schools and libraries, and they don't go into bookstores. That was
Gotcha.
my second book. But I was like, that's not
What
what I
were they,
want.
real quick? I'm just curious. Like,
There was one that was
what were
just
you
like
able
a
to
gold.
sell?
I those were just illustrating people's manuscripts. So
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
initially, the first 5 book deals I got was illustrating other
Other people
people's,
were okay. Okay.
yeah, manuscripts. So I went from like I kept climbing the. There are like there's a big 6 publishers. You have Scholastic, and you
Oh
have
yeah. Yeah.
Macmillan, and you have Simon and Schuster, and Penguin Random House, and HarperCollins. Like you have these big ones, right? But there's millions of other publishers. So I just kept going like bing, 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 and then when I was ready, like I was really frustrated at one point. I was ready to quit, and I kind of threw out my whole portfolio because like I've been doing this for 7 years and I haven't gotten a big publisher yet.
Mm.
And I was like getting really annoyed.
Yeah, it's a long time to like.
Yeah, I
true
wanted
dedication, honestly.
I had gotten to the point where like I've done everything I could and I haven't cracked the nut yet. And I was just really frustrated. And so I threw out my whole portfolio, and I had been drawing just this girl. And I filled my portfolio with drawings of her that were kind of like I'm just going to put in whatever doodles that I like that I've done. And that's I put her on a postcard. I mailed the postcard because I lived in Long Island, and at the time the postcard landed 24 hours later. Right, put it in the mail one day, it's in Manhattan the next day. And that day my phone rang the whole day, and my email box filled up, and every big publisher offered me a book deal for that postcard.
Holy shit.
Except Disney, which always pisses me off. I was like, why couldn't I get Disney?
No, come on.
All publishers. Yeah. Yeah, it was that thing that you can't make happen. I had a lightning strike.
Yeah.
So I got a big book deal. I got a series. That's like a big deal to get a book series.
Off the bat, they offered you multiple books?
The first book was a 1-book deal.
Okay.
And when I brought the final art in, so you get like a year to make a picture book. So when I brought all the final art in to HarperCollins, they looked at the final art, and what I heard happen was the president of HarperCollins Children's Books said to my editor, lock her down. We don't want her going anywhere else.
That's great.
And they did. And they threw a series at me, and threw money at me, and
that's sick. And you got to pick which publisher you wanted to go with as well.
I did. I had that many offers that I could pick. And I didn't have an agent at the time.
Wow.
Either, which was very weird because I was kind of getting these smaller book deals.
Tell me about this magic postcard. So it wasn't just a drawing. What did you put on this thing?
Yeah, I can go grab it.
Yeah, you should. This is awesome.
It's funny. I only have a few of them left from all those years ago, and I'm like, I have to save one.
Yeah, this is like your first dollar you put on the wall.
This is the postcard that I mailed. And all it is of the character. She just looks like she's trying to hug her drawings, right? Yeah. And that's all it is. And that's it. And then on the back, she's just sitting there.
That's great.
Right? And you look at it and you go like, what's the big deal about it? And I think it is in one drawing, I captured the personality of this kid.
You can definitely, again, it's that life. You have a life to your characters that, again, it's not like a simple thing to be able to do that. It's a very rare skill, I think. Did you write anything on it? You didn't just send a blank. Do you have an idea? Also, who did you send it to?
You know, the other thing I did, which I think is also a smart thing that people should hear me now and believe me later that they should do, is I didn't just throw spaghetti at the wall. I was very targeted in who I mailed it to.
Gotcha.
Because there's so many editors and art directors in New York.
Yeah.
And I knew there was a good chunk of people, just like there's a good chunk of people that don't like cartoons. Like there are people who like beautiful, lush pastels and watercolors and very realistic artwork. So I looked really at like what kinds of books were coming out from what editors. Wow. And I sent 90 postcards. That's a very succinct amount of postcards.
Yeah.
There are people who mail like 400 postcards. And I never did that. I was like, no, I'm going to do a very like succinct list.
So you did your homework at figuring out
Yeah.
who the people are, what
Yeah.
they would like,
Yes.
and who matches up with what you like to do, and you surgically got in front of those people.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a way to, again, try not to waste time and energy. Is if you always do a little bit more work,
Yeah.
it's going to pay off.
And you didn't give up. Like you said, it took 7 years. You were ready to quit because it's like nothing's happening.
Right.
That's some serious dedication. I don't think most people do that either. I think people are like, it's been 6 months. This sucks.
I think I qualify as somebody who is driven and also a little nuts. Like, I think that you have to be that like obsessed.
Yeah.
Something like now I teach college, I get angry at the students and I'm like, if you want this, you have to be obsessed,
It's
like that's when I turn into like angry mom teacher. And like, come on, kids, like you have to, like, you want this, you have got to put in the effort. Like,
yeah.
Or maybe you don't really
want it. Yeah. No, yeah. I fully agree, and it resonates because there's, like I was telling you, I'm like half interested in a million things, and it's like, well, maybe you're not really that interested in that if you haven't put a lot of work into it. That's great. That's all very good lessons and information. So you get your own series. Do you want to talk about that at all, or do you want to move into like how your education? Let's choose your own adventure now. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to say, like, it was a dream come true.
Yeah,
it was amazing. It was rewarding. It was exciting. I got to talk to people who wanted to animate my characters. It all was a truly like full circle life fulfillment. It was a period of about 3 or 4 years. So and then I had married that guy and he left. And when he left when I was at the peak, like the peak of, we had a 15-year-old kid. So here's like the like life can turn on a dime moment. Those books and the contracts all became part of a very, very, very angry divorce.
Oh God.
And the series got stopped. It got shelved. So it became a 5-year legal battle.
Jeez. Which
tied up my publishing career. And so that ended. The divorce ended when I moved out of Brooklyn. That was part of the reason why I left Brooklyn. Was I was like, okay, I need something new. He's here and I don't want to be anywhere. So I'm getting the hell out of Dodge. The kid had gone to college. So I had the ability now, like breathe a little bit. And I moved up to Massachusetts, thinking like, okay, I can sustain a life on the cost of living up here better than I could in Brooklyn. And I can restart. I can reboot this career. So that ended October 2019. And then, right?
Yeah.
I was like, yay! And then I was like, so like everybody else and the rest of the world, right? You go into this stasis of Animal Crossing. And but I did do a lot of drawing during the pandemic. It gave me, other than playing Animal Crossing, and I remember I angry planted a lot of plants, like stabbing the ground with a shovel during the pandemic was great. And I couldn't have done that in Brooklyn. So I did a lot of thinking and a lot of dreaming and a lot of drawing, and slowly started to write new books. And so that's the plus side of that downtime that we all had, is like, well, it did allow a lot of people to do things that they wouldn't have had time for before. So many people got into bird watching. So many people got into bread making, So yeah, I got back to writing because my brain finally, after that divorce, had like the space to create.
Yeah.
Um, to create. So, and then I started to teach an online class because again, everybody was stuck at home. So I started to teach a character design class online, which is through the illustration department, which is an illustration kind of. I don't know if you've ever looked at them, but they have an amazing podcast too. The illustration department. This guy Giuseppe
Oh,
Castellano.
what's
He's
it
a
called?
former art director. It's called the Illustration Department Podcast,
I'll check it
and
out.
yeah, and he's got tons of great interviews with just so many different kinds of illustrators. It's not a children's book only um, podcast at all. It's all over the world of illustration. So he offered me that. He was like, "Hey, I want to start, giving classes," and I was like, "Okay, I'll do it because it's something I can do."
Yeah.
We're all stuck at home, and I found out that I loved helping people draw better characters.
That's cool.
That what you said you can see in my art. I then realized I had the ability to help teach somebody how to do that better.
That's cool.
How do you loosen up with your drawing? Don't be so tight. Don't be so stiff. You have to stay in the scribbles longer. You can't just rush because everybody wants finished art. Everybody wants a sellable thing. But if you rush to it, it's going to suck. Take your time. Make it better. If you take your time, you do those drawings like I do, more drawings, odds are the end product's going to be a zillion times better, So I found through that I loved teaching, which then led to going for my MFA so that, like I do everything, I don't want to swim in the swamp without the degree and then later on go, I'm not getting paid as much as an actual professor. I would like to get the degree and go in with my age, my experience, my publishing background. I should hopefully be able to get a decent position, teaching in college, than kind of having to, I don't want to work my way up a ladder at this age.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to find a good level, mid-level rung that I can start at.
Yeah.
So, So that's what kind of led me to now, which literally last night at 1:37 a.m. I finished my master's thesis.
Awesome.
The paper was done a little while ago, but the art and everything has to be like printed and framed and ready for a show. So yeah, it was actually this morning, 1:37 a.m.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been a wild 2.5 year journey, but I'm glad it's going to be over soon. And I started teaching some college classes in January, so I've already kind of started that.
That's cool. You're a real go-getter. You don't mess around. You just kind of do it.
Yeah, I want to do more. Like, I feel like I don't. I feel like my get up and go had gone up and went for a while.
Well, as someone who also has gone through a divorce, luckily, like was the cleanest break humanly possible. But even then, I was miserable for a year. Like I was just intensely depressed, and it was still an awful experience. I can only imagine assets being fought over for 5 years must have been a nightmare.
And it wasn't just like my books were like I have absolutely no qualms about speaking badly about him. So because he literally walked out, like he left and never looked back.
Jeez.
And like to say
and then but then also fought to like. That's weird.
Well, it was the kind of like whenever I say to somebody like, imagine the worst divorce that you could have ever heard of, right? I said, and then there's mine. And I think it's because it was like a completely one-sided thing where there was no empathy, compassion, or love. Like it died in It didn't happen in a moment. It happened. It happened over probably about a year or two that I didn't know he was online dating.
Oh God.
So I wasn't aware of that. So, but just to cut through the baloney, like I think I wouldn't wish what happened to me or my kid, because he's never spoken to his child again. Like I would never wish what happened to us on anyone, and I wish it didn't happen to us. But I will say, which maybe you felt that way too in that year, is like something that happens to you that you never imagined could happen to you. You don't realize how strong you are.
Yeah.
Right?
That makes
You
sense.
go through it, right? And you're like, I never thought I could survive something like this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, now my feeling is like, whatever happens, I can figure it out.
Right.
If I could figure all this stuff
Yeah.
out, I can figure anything out.
That's
So,
good.
bad stuff will always happen, but I'm like, okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Totally.
It's given me a level of,
Yeah. Were you busting out your mantra a lot during that time?
I did.
Yeah.
I remember like standing in supermarkets, and I'm not supposed to say it out loud, but I would say, like, I'd be standing in the supermarket and I'd be like, mantra. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that, but like you said, at least you were able to pull something positive out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's the way you move forward. You have to find the positives.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah. And now, like you said you had watched the video that Christian Jamie C and I had made, the cartoon everything video, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. And so now, like, the MFA, the cool byproduct of you go and well, I got to get my degree so I can be a teacher. You then get at a different point in your life, right? So why go back to school? Yeah, you want to get the degree, but then you meet people at a different part of your life and you're like so inspired and invigorated, right? So even like the thing like where you were the indie creator, Comic-Con creator.
Dude, same. I'm like always gotta think it through before I
attempt. I see 3.
Yeah, there you go. Let's call it that.
So yeah, I think these are the things. Excuse me, where you find people at different points in your life where you're like, you meet people and then they kind of fill you with like new ideas and inspiration and make you want to pursue something that maybe you only toyed with, the idea of doing before.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So for me, like I definitely, we're giving this workshop in the summer, which is a cartooning skills workshop. And so again, it's different than my character design teaching because I want to talk about all of cartooning and cartooning in all its applications, not just for children's books. The idea that if you have well-developed cartooning skills, there's so many different things that you can actually do.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of different things, but there's more things that I'd like to do too. I would like to do kids comics. So, the idea that there's no reason in the world why I shouldn't be able to. I just never have, right? Yeah. I just never have. So, yeah.
That's cool. Are you itching to get back, in front of publishers in illustration, or is that a old chapter, or what does your future look like?
No. I have a new book coming out.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I have a new book deal. I did not write this one. My wonderful friend, her name is Samantha Berger. We've been friends since I got into children's books. So she is an author of over 40 children's books, and we became friends. But she would always say to me, like, we need to do something together because we would have so much fun. And I had been so busy because I had gotten all these book deals that I was never like available. So 6 months ago, she's like, I wrote something for you. Are you free? And I was like, oh yeah, now. Like now I'm quite free. So she wrote a book And she wrote it with me in mind as the artist. It's super funny. It's super Looney Tunesy. Um, the characters are ears of corn. Uh, so it's really crazy. And she's a writer for Sesame Street, and
Oh, cool.
she's an amazing writer and an amazing funny writer. So the book is funny, and it's a joy to go back to children's books working with a pal,
Hmm.
and also to know it's been built for you to step into. So it's kind of nice. So it'll come out spring of 2026.
Awesome.
So I start working on it next month. I finish my MFA and I go right into the book.
That's good.
And then I have other books that I made during my MFA
Oh, wow.
that I am pitching.
Cool.
So
Would you ever self-publish? Is that something you're interested in, or is that a dirty word, or how do you feel about it?
It is not a dirty word like it used to be at all. And I think, again, in the comic world of comics, they call it indie,
Yeah.
right? And in the world of traditional publishing, like these children's books, they call it self-publishing, which used to be a dirty word. And it has certainly morphed over the years into less of a dirty word. Being in and around comic creators a lot. Some of my best friends make comics. I would totally do it. Yeah.
That is the coolest thing I would say of comics is like, you're just doing it. You're not waiting for someone to give you permission. You're literally just being like, I think this is a cool thing. I'm going to make it. And you make it. Now, whether you make any money, that's where a publisher is nice. But the action of just doing it is a very satisfying feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I think through knowing Misi a lot, it's funny. I have another friend, Dave Roman, who publishes through like First Second. And so I've seen both sides of like people who are in the comics world and the different ways to do it. But ultimately, like that is true. Like there's a band of brothers feeling when it's the indie, right? The indie creators. Yeah. And I think for me, it is taking a leap away from, there's a lot of Michigots getting a publisher that's traditional to take your book. It's like, it's kind of like winning the lottery, getting a big publisher to take your book and publish it. But then you're very secure and you get a lot of money. You get a decent amount of money. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's taking the leap away from that security of being with a publisher, and like the whole world of Kickstarters and Patreon. Like I am just like, how are you all doing this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know either. I haven't tried any of that yet.
Right? You haven't tried that either. Mm-mm. Okay. Yeah.
It's interesting. Although I would say I could easily see someone of your talents and energy and like stick-to-itiveness. Like I could easily see you making your own, like writing, drawing, publishing, paying to do everything yourself, and then dropping a chunk of change on advertising and just getting yourself in front of people. I feel like you could be successful in that. Like that would not shock me if you made more money doing that than, waiting for fancy people in New York City to give you the thumbs up.
And another thing that used to be a dirty word that is less of a dirty word these days is Amazon. Many people who have been traditionally published, what they will do is they will get all their books that they've had published, right? They're on Amazon, and then they will publish books through Amazon, which are essentially self-published. But because they have the traditional ones up there, they support the other ones, and vice versa. Smart. And then they start to do that. So I have known friends who have switched, and what they do is every couple of years they'll get one out there traditionally, but then they'll pump out the ones.
Yeah.
Or like my book, I could have like a How to Draw with Louise book.
Totally.
But all the sales from the other books support that book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's
something to
lots
think
of
about.
avenues. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think being open is something like to those kind of things is something that now I'm like totally like, yeah.
That's cool.
It's more of that, like, okay, wait, okay, how many, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. And also
basket.
don't wait for permission. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if you have a following, you know,
Right.
execute on it, you know?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up? Anything we didn't hit?
No, I think, this is awesome that, you had me, and I thank you very, very much. I'm looking forward to going next year. Are you going to go back?
I am. Yeah. I'm excited as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be cool. I think it'll be interesting to see how much bigger. I think it will be much bigger.
I have this feeling, that the first one is always the hardest one, and I'm assuming they've established that they're a thing, and I'm excited to see what that means next time.
Yeah, and I want to say thanks for having someone like me.
Yeah, totally. I have much to learn, and you have a lot of good advice and good examples, and your art's quite badass. It's cute, but it doesn't mean it's not badass, and I agree. It has an energy I would love to be able to harness. Like, to create characters that look like they're alive is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the one thing I can do. So I do.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Well, this was super fun. Thank you for taking the time. And if you want to come back anytime, hit me up. We'll maybe we can talk about your book when it drops or whatever.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's super fun. So it would be funny to talk about.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.